Hi folks, welcome to the second video and the first real content lecture of English 102. Now you're already well into some of your content. You've already written a summary, you've already read part of your textbook, but you have this week your MLA quiz or your MLA test coming up. This should be a review for all of you, but if it's not, you are welcome to email me or to meet with me in Google Meets and we can go over some things in more detail. I'm just going to run through some of the big ideas of MLA so that you're ready for your review test coming up this week. Now, I am most interested in, and I think most professors are most interested in your getting the ideas of whatever form of documentation that you're using, whether that's MLA or APA, which we will work on later in the semester, or Chicago style, which you may have some professional courses in college that will ask you to do Chicago style or something even more specific to a certain field. MLA and APA are the two most common academic documentation formats. And I want to go over just some of the keys to MLA, the internal logic, and the ways to keep from getting yourself into trouble. Now, you will have professors who look at every single comma on your works cited page, every single period, every single colon. I am less worried about your being able to copy a model perfectly than I am in your being able to determine where you should document and how to do so, as far as the big ideas go. So, briefly, MLA stands for Modern Language Association. It is one form of documenting sources. It is the one most commonly used in the humanities. And when we get to APA, we will talk a little bit about how you can sort of ideologically tell the difference between MLA and APA. You can tell what it is the humanities prioritize and what it is the sciences prioritize just by what they make you prioritize when you're sharing research in those fields. The internal logic of MLA is that you want the reader to be able, from reading your paper, to go back to the original source, the original words, the original phrasing. So if you refer to someone like Pauline Kael, for instance, who was a very famous critic, even if you paraphrase those ideas, even if you summarize those ideas, in the humanities, the reader who is doing research wants to be able to go back to the original words. So, MLA prioritizes page numbers. In MLA, you're going to see parenthetical citations in the text that look like this. Usually, this first word here is the author's last name. Now, it's not there because it's the author's last name. It's there because usually, if you're referring to something that has an author stated, then the author's last name is the first word of the works cited entry. And that's where your parenthetical notation is really sending your reader. So this is referring to a works cited entry. That's your list of works that you have cited at the end of your paper. This, in the text, would be referring the reader to a works cited entry that looks like this, for instance. And in real life, this would be much longer. I'm truncating it for, again, I don't care that much about periods and colas and commas and things like that. I want to know that you know the internal logic and that you're not accidentally plagiarizing. Those are the things that will actually get you in trouble. So, if my works cited entry starts with the name Perry, comma, Katie, that's last name first, then my in-text citation or my parenthetical citation starts with that same word and the page number, because in the humanities, we want to get back to the original words if we're doing research. The other thing that's key for you to remember before your MLA test, anything you get from another source, whether you borrowed the actual words or you only borrowed ideas, if you quoted directly, most high school students don't have any trouble understanding that if you quote something directly, you need a parenthetical citation. Where people tend to get in trouble is in borrowing ideas, summarizing passages, paraphrasing passages, and things like that, and not realizing that even if you didn't use the author's own words, if you borrowed their ideas, if you borrowed their sentence structure, you have to cite that as well. Now, a lot of times at this point, people say, well, in a research paper, doesn't that mean I'm going to be citing every single sentence? No. And that's another problem that we sometimes have when we start learning to write research papers. That it is somebody else's words, somebody else's ideas, just one right after the other. So another thing you need to remember is something called, well, what I call the quote sandwich. Or if you want to be fancy about it, integration of research. Anytime you use research, you have to tie that research to your own ideas. The easiest way to think about that is introduce, quote, or paraphrase or summarize comment. So at any place in a research paper where you have other people's material, where you've done research, where you're quoting someone or borrowing their ideas or summarizing their work, anywhere you see that, you're going to want to introduce that material, maybe explain to me as the reader why I care about this particular author. If Ernest Hemingway said that, why do I care? What is it about Hemingway that makes him significant? Then you're going to want to include your research, your quotes, your paraphrase, your summary. Then you're going to want to comment on that, and that means tie it into the point you're trying to make. Often it's going to seem obvious to you how this quote or this paraphrase supports your thesis. But trust me when I tell you, it will not be obvious to the reader unless you tell the reader why that's significant and why that makes sense. When you look at your grading criteria for your research papers, because I use the same grading criteria all the way through the semester, you get more credit at the end for these papers than you do at the beginning, and that's why I can use the same criteria, because you're weighted more toward doing better at the end. But if you look on your grading criteria, you're going to see under research that integration of research being sources being well chosen and well integrated, Well integrated is what I'm talking about here. Are you introducing and commenting on each source, on each piece of research that you use? That's what we're learning right now. That and how to correctly cite sources so that we don't accidentally plagiarize. We will talk about this over and over again all semester long as it comes up. But right now, this week, you have a quiz over the basic tenets of MLA. You've got, 50 pages, give or take, of review to go through in your textbook. A lot of those are models. Like I said, nobody expects you to memorize those models. I have never memorized them. I've never met a professional scholar or PhD who has memorized those. Everybody uses the models. That part of scholarly life is simply open book. But you do need to know what elements are really important within this documentation system. So that's where we're going to start. I hope this has helped. If you need more help from me, of course, you can email me. We can catch up in Google Meets. I have office hours several times a week that you're welcome to drop in on. Any of those resources are available to you. So keep in touch. Don't worry too much about this. As I said, it should be entirely review for you. Have a good week. You know where I am if you need me.